Faisal, you had asked me to call you again. We were talking about, what were we talking about?
Free will. And
yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking, well, this is not going to go very well over the phone, and so let me just bring this conversation to the Hanakah, and I thought, well, rather than me answer it just from my own opinion or from my own understanding, let me bring a little bit of Shabbastari and Lahiji into it, and to then have the conversation based more on that, okay? And what we could do, though, is we could start by saying that Horace and I, Faisal and I, we had a conversation about free will, and we were going around and around in the normal way that at the level of words and rationality that we could explore this topic to some extent. Whereas in fact the Sufi doctrine is that we can't really understand it that way. Nevertheless, we would use the arguments that we could. And what do you recall about that conversation?
That that destiny is not so much set in stone, that we do have a play, we do have decisions that can alter your destiny in some ways, that it's not so set in stone the way I understood it as.
Yeah, that there's a strange situation, and that we have to at the same time act as though we are going to be making some free choices, because it would seem the directives of the Quran would be meaningless otherwise. And on the other hand, in much of the Quran, we find out that we don't have any free will. So there's a paradox.
Yeah, exactly.
And this paradox is like other supposed paradoxes that people find in God's nature. The essence, the divine names, does he have a hand, does he not have a hand? And generally, in the case of God's nature, let's call it a case of different levels. So the levels are Hahut, utterly beyond our conception, ipseity, he is as he is, we cannot know him, Lahut, divinity, which can be known through experience, Jabarut, the domain of the potentials of the divine names, which can be known, which is a further unveiling of differentiation. So Hahut, no differentiation. Lahut is an interworld, an interface between non-differentiated and differentiated, meaning singularity and multiplicity. Does anybody else agree in the world of spirituality? Sure, they all agree, and they could be really far-fetched, like Taoism is pretty about as far, I would say, as you could get from Islam in terms of philosophically, and they have the same idea. So there's a world of Huntun, which is a chaotic world of undifferentiated potential multiplicity, etc. So it's a common idea explored by, literally explored, meaning explorers often left Europe and they found islands and continents and made up maps and things, and they slowly got an idea of what was going on. And these are explorers in the domain of the inner world. And they are exploring an inner space, and they find out through their exploration what is going on. Coming down that line, there's a world of visible forms. They're imaginalized and so forth, and then finally there's this world of physical reality, which is often regarded as the sole reality by many modern thinkers. Now, the world of free will is a little bit different. Instead of different domains, let's call it different layers of illusion. different layers of illusion. So, at the human side, I'd say the way to think about the thickest and most pervasive illusion is that I do have a separate existence. Like whether that empowers me or disempowers me. Like it disempowers me if I have a separate existence and I'm running from everyone else. Or it maybe empowers me because I'm a separate individual and I don't need to worry about others as I grab from them what I wish. It doesn't have to be either or. I'm just saying that when we think about what we understand about that illusion, that it's a world of objectification, a world we can learn about from childhood as we grow up. So the Sufi point of view is that the first illusion, by definition, assumes separateness, whether in will or, it doesn't really dawn. The philosophical part of it may be of some interest, but it doesn't really dawn on that individual that they are not an actor, because they've already bought into the idea of being separate from. And if they're a pure materialist, they could, of course, lots of ideas, philosophical and others, but they generally think they are getting up in the morning, they are making good decisions, bad decisions. They may blame other people for what happened to them, but they are generally self-protective and regard themselves as having a certain measure of free will. So you see what I mean? It's more in case of domains, it's about, in this case, it'll be about, when Rumi starts the Masnavi, what does he say all the ills come from what? What's the first line of Masnavi? Vishnu as nai chun ekayat mikonat as judoi ha shekayat mikonat. Huh? What's judoi ha?
Separation.
A plural, in the plural. Huh? Now the original text is a little slightly different. It's same general meaning. Huh? Vishnu innai chun shekayat mikonat. It starts out with the complaint. Huh? Listen to this. Read Vishnu innai chun shekayat mikonat as judoi ha hekayat mikonat, and tells the stories of the separations. It's more likely to have the pain first and then to tell the stories, isn't it? So either way, it's generally the same meaning, that the source of the trouble is objectification and separations. So he says there's a layer of separations, and then he goes on and he makes his point through the whole Masnavi that this is the case. So when we look at the question of free will in Rumi, we're going to see him explore it in this range. So what about the fellow who goes and steals the fruit from an orchard? Do you know this story in the Masnavi? This guy comes and he steals the fruit and the owner catches him. What does he say to the owner?
That God commanded me or something?
I have no free will.
Yeah.
I have no free will. And everything is the action of God. Now the owner of the orchard is a smart enough fellow, and he says, wise guy. Not only is he full of separation, he's making a layered cake here. You know, he's really getting into the separations and he's misusing this doctrine, so I'll teach him a lesson. So what does he do to him?
I think he hits him.
He ties him up and he starts beating him with a stick, and they're going, stop beating me with a stick. He says, I'm not beating with you with a stick. I have no action, only God has action here. So Rumi's trying to, in a fun way, illustrate the paradox, isn't he? But really throughout Masnavi, he's going to take different views, and he wants us to understand that there are layers of illusion. And that's, I'm giving this as a preface, because when I read Lahiji, I want you to understand why it is that this, just as Rumi talks about separations, why is it that many of the Sufis talk about more than one kind of fana, one kind of annihilation? And that is because separations for Rumi, they can be defined as illusions. And death, annihilation of an illusion, is not such a bad thing. So annihilation in Sufism does not mean the death of what is essential, it only means the death of what is illusory. So keeping that in mind, if I read to you, I'm hoping it gives you a bit of an introduction to this, okay? Do you have any questions before I start reading from that? Okay. Anyone else have something they wish to add or question about that? Okay. So, as usual, one of the books that I have translated and enjoy a great deal is the Ulshane Roz of Mahmoud Shabastari. And very often these levels are often described as stages, and it is very confusing because not infrequently we see 7 stages of development, which would be like 7 kinds of dissolution of illusory identity. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's this. And in this section that I'm reading from, these stages are represented by the essential characteristics of individual prophets. And so, if I read to you just quickly from so he starts, not surprisingly, with Adam. And I'm not going to read the commentary on all of these, I just want you to hear what he has to say about these. He's correctly put these prophets in chronological order as per the Quran. So he points out that the human being rises out of hell's lowest dungeon and turns his face towards the highest heaven. So this is generally known as Tauba, like the first stage traditionally in Sufism. And Shabastari says in that moment he is truly repentant, becoming one of Adam's chosen sons. And you could say, or daughters. I mean, here he means the human quality. And Adam, of course, is the one who brought us into this domain to begin with. But he becomes representative of Tauba because, after all, his sadness and his repentance was that he cried. How long did he cry? 40 years. Huh? How much did you say?
40.
How much did you say?
She said 40.
40 years, huh? Yeah. She's a good scholar. She would know the answer to this, you see. So 40 years, Adam is crying and crying and crying. So clearly he is upset, and he says to God, what constantly says, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. And Satan, who led him astray, does he do the same thing or does he not? No, he does the opposite, huh? So in other words, the characteristics of Adam, as God is delighted to have somebody reciting those names of asking forgiveness, and Adam is representing this. So we go on from there. Our objective is to get to your question, but we just need to understand it's a contextual thing. When purified of blameworthy actions, he rises into the heavens like Idris. So you may know about Idris, so this is in the order of these prophets, is the second one. Huh? So Idris is actually sort of reincarnated. Who does he become? Idris is in the Quran, he rises up and he reappears on the earth as someone else, another prophet. Ilyas. He comes back as Ilyas. Are you aware of that? That he comes back as Ilyas, and is a very interesting thing. I gave a whole talk at the Ismaili Institute about Salam ala Ilyasin. It's Ilyasin, the two Ilyases, you see, and you do the abjad is very interesting. Anyway, the thing about when he was Idris, he, the first stage of conventional Sufism is a journey of denuding, meaning letting go of attachments, becoming purified so as to get a viewpoint, an abstracted viewpoint of the situation, which many people would regard as the ultimate objective of the path, but in Sufism that would be the beginning of the path. Finding deliverance from unworthy qualities, he becomes like Noah, a master of constancy. Now, it's not that he has no human qualities left, but he's found deliverance and he's striving, but why would he be characterized as having constancy? What makes Noah so steadfast? What is it per se? We talked about it earlier today, huh? A little bit at lunch. What's special about Noah?
Patient, his patient.
Huh?
Patient, his patient. His patient.
His patience, yes. And not only that, his recognition that he could be preaching for 950 years to no effect. So even though God wants him to, in other words, as an archetype, we don't know historically exactly what the situation, but he's the archetype of somebody who is committed and becomes steadfast. Because another way you could think of it is that if I am Noah, I've been preaching to my nafs now for 65 years, and pretty much to no avail, you see. So you have to be like Noah, preaching to your own nafs amore, knowing that it's not going to really make any progress, but you're going to do it anyway. See what I'm saying? You have to. The Sufis want to look at the Quran as a story about how you're going to address yourself, how you're going to understand it for yourself. Now we get closer, in this case, to Abraham. His partial powers vanish in the universal will. He'll then be like Abraham, the possessor of trust. Why is Abraham the possessor of trust? What happens to Abraham that he trusts God so completely?
He was supposed to kill his own son. He was willing to.
Yes, very good, very good. So there's several things. Like before that, was there another time when he had to exercise complete trust?
Stepped into fire.
The fire, yeah. And he doesn't question that. He's not worried. He has complete tawakkul. So we have several examples, two of which have been given so far. Huh? One is he completely trusts God's judgment, even though he was wrong, God said, about what he saw. In God's wisdom, always having some ambiguity in the nature of a prophet, so that, in a sense, people would be forced to internalize rather than not internalize the prophetic reality. So that the prophet would have to have some failing, if not, we would never be able to internalize, because we have, by our nature, failings like this. See, but in this case, we're not talking about failings. We're talking about their strengths, huh? And their specific strengths. So he has tawakkul, huh? And we could go on with Abraham because he was known for this, but we're really after getting to where I wish to speak about. With his own will tied to satisfaction in God, like Moses, he enters through the highest gate. So what is Rizal? Because I think in the Persian we would see, huh? You see, so there's this idea that his will is going to be joined to satisfying God, or finding satisfaction in God. what kinds of things happen to Moses that this becomes the case? What does he do?
He did so many things. Khidr, the story of Khidr.
He did so many things, and he's the most written about prophet. And what we see, in the case of Khidr, you know, again, God is trying to teach him a lesson, because in each case, whether it is his transition from, I mean, did he not murder someone? Did God think he murdered someone? Yes, because he said, "Oh God, forgive me," and God says, "I forgive you," and God wouldn't have said, I forgive you, unless he thought that he had murdered someone. So we know, some people say, "Oh no, he didn't really murder that." Forget it, you know, go read the Quran. So he has this such an interesting, you could just take everything in the Quran about Moses and make a whole book just from that, because that's how much material there is. Huh? But what we know is that he ended up so completely giving up self-satisfaction for the sake of satisfying God, that's why he's been characterized as someone whose will is joined to satisfying God, satisfaction in God. Okay, abandoning his own limited knowledge, he becomes like Jesus of celestial nature. So these are the kinds of dissolutions of illusion that I'm talking about, or these are here represented as but really the one I want to focus on, sort of as a summary, he surrenders his existence to God's plundering. Now in the poetry, a lot of the Sufi poetry, i.e. Hafiz and others, God is characterized as a plunderer. Who are the plunderers of that era? Like they don't need to wonder who it is, because they're busy avoiding them. Who are the plunderers of Rumi's time and Shahrastari's time?
Mongols.
The Mongols. They're like everywhere. And they're literally plunderers. That's what they do. Hey, what's your business? I'm a plunderer. You see, that's what they do. They come, they don't plan to come over and take over your city just yet and civilize it. They become civilizers, but they initially are pure and simple plunderers, see? And they hate civilization. He surrenders his existence to God's plundering and follows Muhammad on his miraculous ascension. So this is the end of those seven. There's seven. Adam, Idris, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. See? Okay. And again, the question we're focusing on here is more about will. And just one thing, I have to find the location of this for a second. Okay, so as usual, what we'll do is we'll make sure there's time for conversation, and that's why I'm restricting it to kind of this more of a summary. And so now, what is the opposite of Rumi's separations? In Islamic terminology, what is the opposite of objectification and separation? Wasl, and there's a doctrine imposed on all Muslims, whether they're mystics or non-mystics, which is the doctrine of Tawheed. Unification. That the God is one and has no partner, and any notion you may have about your own talents and existence is an illusion. Unification goes far beyond just the idea that you shouldn't have an idolatry. For the Muslim, it's about idolatry, but for the Sufi, it's an absolute doctrine. No partners in beauty, no partners in power. The potential for attenuation, yes, meaning the doctrine of the mirror can be crooked or flat or curved and can reflect all divine qualities, altering them according to the characteristics of the mirror, but cannot fundamentally possess any of those qualities reflected in the mirror. In a nutshell, that's kind of the how they metaphysically will describe whether it's evil or free will or anything like this. Okay, so Tawheed, unification, would be the fundamental direction. So no surprise, on this last line, he says, Maratebe Tawhidi Shuhudi. So the levels of experiential unification, clearly explaining that there's a difference between belief and experience. Huh? And he goes on to emphasize that, as he says, Chun nihayate kamale wasilan. Wasilan kamel shuhud jamal mutlaq tawhid zati ast که مقام محمود حتم محمدی هست علیه السلام فرمود که دهد یک باره هستی را با تاراج در آید در پی احمد و معراج. دهد یک باره هستی را با تاراج در آید در پی احمد و معراج. It has to follow this meter of Hazaj, huh? So, mufa'ilun, mufa'ilun, mufa'il. So if there's any doubt in your mind, just use the meter, huh, to see what he's saying in Persian. That's the line I quoted to you earlier, huh? So the English, as I've translated it in this book, was he surrenders his existence to God's plundering and follows Muhammad on his miraculous ascension, giving a little bit of explanatory adjectives for the average reader. Huh? In here, everyone in the Islamic world, they understand the Miraj, what it is on the ascension. Bedan ke tawhid shuhudi, ayani, wajdani, zawqi ra سه مرتبه است. اول آنکه حضرت حق و تجلی افعالی بر سالک متجلی شود و سالک صاحب تجلی جميع افعال آشیا را در افعال حق فانی یابد و در هیچ مرتبه و هیچ شیء غیر از حق فاعل نبیند و غیر او مؤثر نشناسد. اول آنکه حضرت حق و تجلی افعالی بر سالک متجلی شود و سالک صاحب تجلی جمعی افعال آشیا را در افعال حق فانی یابد و در هیچ مرتبه و هیچ شیئی غیر حق فاعل نبیند و غیر او مؤثر نشناسد. The first of these levels is the possessor, first of these levels is the presence of true reality, manifests through the theophany of the actions to the seeker. And the seeker, who is the possessor of this revelation, sees that all of the actions of all of the things are annihilated in the sole action of true reality, and in no level and in no thing does he or she see other than true reality as the actor and the doer. And other than true reality does not see any cause of these events. So this is very interesting, because this is sort of the lowest level where again, what I was saying to you about free will is we first have to say, well, why are they approaching it this way? Is because they see from experience that people can have mystical experiences where initially they're overtaken by their sense of the unity of their surroundings. The unity of the world is very commonly an initial mystical experience where suddenly a person feels at one with and realizes the interconnectedness of what is happening. And if you were to read books of Zen Buddhism, you would see it's identical. Their notion of a kensho, of an initial opening of understanding reality. Does anybody feel they've had an experience like that, where they felt one with the surroundings, or they felt that the surroundings, that all the events were actually part of one event? Or did people feel that they were only the witness of that? I saw you were kind of nodding your head. Tell me about it.
Both, actually.
Yeah.
To feel one and to feel as a witness.
Yeah.
Of that, and sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
Witness
So
yourself.
you're right. You're absolutely. I agree with you that we can still be separate. Would be the threshold, meaning the arrival at that level, and a threshold that we would of course return to as we found our separation again. But initially we might be witnessing suddenly a strange thing, which is everything is one, and then we might even get lost in it. Anyone else feel that they've had that kind of experience? So you see what I mean? Right away, do you see how this affects free will? Because free will assumes that one is a separate being. And what I was saying to you is the standard simple Sufi answer is the finger, the hand, and the person. The illusion of the finger is that it is moving itself. But Sufis use exactly this analogy because they're trying to, on a simple level, get people to grasp what's going on. Sometimes it's described as the ants writing. Al-Ghazali likes to explain it as the ants that see writing and trying to understand what is happening, because they're trying to attribute the willfulness of the writing to the ink itself or the pen, and then they find the hand. Have you read this section? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about, huh? And they're using an intellectual argument, but fundamentally the Sufis say this is not going to help you very much. In Zen, they'll say the same thing. It's not going to help you very much. You need to have an experience. And very often it's a sound from outside. And sometimes if you read, well, it could be, do you guys know Ijo? Ijo is the Japanese Zen teacher, student of Dogen. Have you guys heard of Dogen? Yeah. So So anyway, they're very, very much writing about this exact thing that we're talking about now. So if you want to get another point of view, just get some of these writings, huh? To know reality is to know the self, the Dogen. Who says that in the Islamic faith? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, huh? Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu, huh? To know reality is to know the self. To know the self is to forget the self. Second line. To forget the self is to awaken within the 10,000 things. This Dogen. We'll consider that he's writing from a position of meditation and being in Zen, and he's very much addressing the experiential approach to the question, how shall I, why am I even worried about free will? Well, generally I'm worried about death, I'm worried about sickness, I'm worried about good luck, bad luck, good job, bad job, etc., etc. See, I'm worried about things that I think affect me, right? But they're interested in the range of perception, and perception is affected by veils that prevent clear understanding of whatever one is looking at. So the reason they are window washers is because they know that if they clean the window, they might see more easily what is in the yard, or outside. So they're all interested in this idea of polishing the perceptions. And this is the first level. And very often in Zen and in Sufism, a person hears a sound. Could be a bird, could be suddenly the bamboo is hit suddenly. But in Ijo and other Zen teachers, they describe people who at the verge of death, they're so sick. They're like very sick, not like when we have the flu recently or whatever. They're very, very sick. And they think this is the great opportunity. I will sit in meditation despite extreme pain. You can read about their point of view. That great openings happen because of the breakdown of habit. If one has a habitual illusion, sometimes, and they even say torture, people are being tortured, and they become enlightened. This is a strange doctrine, huh? But they're basically saying the perception is suddenly so shaken up that the person has an opening and they realize they were not so separate from the events taking place around them. So, but in Sufism, it's a stage, and you may recall elsewhere in Lahiji, instead of approaching it as the death of illusions, they approach it specifically as the different kind of tajaliyat, meaning this is an abbreviation of a broader explanation of this doctrine elsewhere. But this is a concise presentation starting with the first one, which is af'ali. Do you understand the idea of fa'al, this Arabic root? What does it mean, Rahafjan?
Doing.
Doing. And so the doing, does any other creature than God have wujud? Let's start with wujud. According to Sufis, does other creatures have wujud, or they don't have wujud?
They don't.
They have no wujud. They have no existence. They only have the existence from God. So, you know, that's the most general of categories, okay? Agreed? But then it turns out in every example of existence, it's the same rule. So if you're going to talk about doing, turns out the creature has no authentic doing, is what he just said. But initially in af'ali, meaning in the doing, he specifies that it's more about, he sees no thing, like it's not looking so much inside yet, looking more at the happenings, we could say, happenings, doings, actions of things, and even of ourselves, you see. So there's this we call it slightly external dissolution of this hallucination. I thought that, you know, I was actually doing this action when I did this. In the chapter Ismail in Fusus al-Hikam, which culminates in this idea of God being pleased, what does Ibn Arabi say about whatever the servant does, God is pleased? Meaning, even if the servant sins, this is pleasing to his Lord, the idea of being pleasing to one's Lord. And he says a shocking thing, again, a very unacceptable thing to most traditional Muslim thinkers. He says no matter what you do, it is pleasing to its Lord, and if its Lord was the one who leads astray, then it's pleasing to that Lord, if it's the one who does good actions. So you see, he has a whole doctrine. Ibn Arabi approaches it from that point of view, that you are not the owner of your actions. He makes a strong case about why you don't own your own actions. You are more of a vehicle or an aperture for these actions to take place. You are like a medium through which these actions are taking place. According to that viewpoint, this is a simpler one, huh? Feel free to, if your questions come up, to ask about this. And he says that istila in ra, meaning in martaba, in maqam, maqame mahwa mikhana. What's mahwa?
Mahwa?
Yeah.
From the Hawa?
No, this is the way it's mah. Yeah. So what is mah?
Destruction.
Yeah. The annihilation. So again, we have several words that are going to be about dissolution and annihilation, and in Arabic usually, but also in Persian. And in all cases, the thing to remember is it sounds scary, but when you have an illusion destroyed, I don't know about you, but I would describe the scary part up to the destruction is the scary part. But once the illusion is destroyed, generally speaking, there's certainly a time to adjust, but it's generally no longer as scary when you find out it was not real. Whatever kind of illusion we may have had in our lives, think about the nature of anxiety. What did Fritz Perls used to say to people? He said, "What is your catastrophic expectation?" Huh? Did you ever study Perls at all? Yeah, do you remember? Tell me, what is a catastrophic expectation? And Perls would say, huh, to people, and he would say, "Tell me, whatever it is, tell me the scenario. I want to know what the scenario," because in that scenario, he's actually more interested. He's fishing is really what he's doing. And what he's fishing for is, while they're talking, he's watching what their body's doing. And he's fishing for something that's a more powerful hook than the question. So he's fishing for something that will explode and will dissolve this sense, this relationship to the catastrophic expectation. So it's not only in spirituality. We have not all schools of psychology. They would not view the universe at all that way, but Pearl certainly saw a kind of coherent, rising out of the Gestalt school of psychology and developing this idea of Gestalt therapy, he built his career kind of on this idea of the intrinsic nature of health being the lifting away of illusion. And my own experience with teachers from that school is that was kind of their primary method. That, what are you afraid of? Remember, there was a whole thing in the newspapers. Oh, here's my briefcase. We've got a gun, we've got a knife. Which one do you want? Do you remember that? You don't remember that? There's a briefcase. Gun, knife. You're in suicide? Here we go. Do it right now. That'll probably be frowned on today, right? But that, maybe it sounds like a publicity stunt. But Pearls, if you watch the videotapes, I understand Faisal has been enjoying the videotapes of him, huh? The Prince Pearls.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So he had this idea of the illusion. The illusions that we have are so powerful, are they not? Preventing us from achieving what we want. So in this case, it's a philosophical and metaphysical conversation, but they're very, in my mind, there's a relationship to understand there that in the Western context, some of these ideas, like what do they share in common? Not Freudian psychology necessarily, or drug-driven psychotherapy or whatever, but they share the idea of there's a holism, there's an idea of holism in the sense of a unity and also a soundness of integrated, even you could call it goodness, meaning in clarity. And then there's the veiling and the illusion that suppresses what he calls the emerging Gestalt. Huh? Did you study it a little bit or not, the Gestalt therapy? So this idea of, like, in other words, you're just waiting, you're watching with a little bump to kind of emerge from the skin almost, right? This emerging Gestalt from the mind, where you're waiting for this opportunity. And when it comes out, last thing you want to do is suppress it. For his psychology, you want to bring it out, so that the person can return to holism, can return to sanity. You see, so in what he wrote about Gestalt therapy, he had maybe all too simple of a scenario, only allowing for 4 pathologies, huh? Introjection, retroflexion, projection, and confluence. Only those 4 in their interactions. So very simple, straightforward psychology. Maybe too simple, but it really worked for people like me. And it's based on the idea that the medicine is in the problem. Another very old viewpoint in Islam and elsewhere. See, so but coming back to the conversation we have, there's in other words, to get a kind of friendlier relationship with the death of illusion. This illusion, this illusion, this illusion. Maybe it's not so bad. It's more of an Irish wake. Huh? What's an Irish wake? You don't know? Well, I guess you're a good Muslim. A lot of drinking, a lot of partying. See? It's like, yeah, he was a great guy. She was a great person. Yeah, the drink up, let's party, the dance. We see, so it's more of a celebration for the death of something. See? It's not like all somber and everything. So the death, the demise of an illusion. And he's saying this first level is named by the Sufis because they're trying to distinguish. Now, it's a very messy system. There's nothing universal about Sufi terminology. Our own teacher, did he not use the word maha? Yeah, and he pronounced it more that way, huh, for the sake of the Afghans, of dissolution, huh? A kind of dissolution that, in my understanding of Ustad's use of the word, it falls short of fana in a little bit, you know what I mean? It's like a prelude to annihilation. So we could say maybe an effacement of sorts. But even Ustad believed very strongly in a 3-part annihilation. What were the 3 parts? Yeah, so the annihilation in the teacher's knowledge or wisdom, annihilation in the prophet's knowledge and wisdom, and then annihilation in God's knowledge and wisdom. So Sufis decide seemingly arbitrarily on these systems, and I recommend never taking them too literally. It's better to just wait to see what happens to you personally. Now we go back to his text. Dovam martaba on ke Hazrat Haq ba tajalli sifati bar ou mutajalli gardad wa salek صفات جمعی آشیا را در صفات حق فانی یابد و صفات آشیا را صفات حق داند و غیر حق را مطلقاً هیچ صفت نبیند و خود را و آشیا را مظهر و مجالی صفات الهی شناسد و صفات او را در خود ظاهر بیند. دوم مرتبه آنکه حضرت حق به تجلی صفاتی بر او متجلا گردد و سالک صفات جمع آشیا را در صفات حق فانی یابد و صفات آشیا را صفت حق داند و غیر حق را مطلقاً هیچ صفت نبیند و خود را و آشیا را مظهر و مجالی صفات الهی شناسد و صفات او را در خود ظاهر بیند. Got it? Okay. So in English, he says the second level is such that the presence of true reality manifests at the level of the properties or the qualities and becomes revealed to the seeker, who then perceives the totality of that for the totality of all the things they find their dissolution, in this case using fani, or annihilation, in true reality. And the seeker perceives directly and knows that the qualities of the things are actually the qualities of true reality. And other than true reality, absolutely and completely, the seeker does not see any quality other than that, and so much so that even for himself and in himself or herself, he sees that this self and the things, all of the things, are actually theaters and places of manifestation or appearance of the divine qualities. And he sees that this divine qualities even are the source of his own qualities. They are manifesting and becoming apparent in himself only, meaning they are not belonging to him. So this level, as we said, is the next level. The first level was the idea of doings, actions, happenings, and this level is what might color, you could say, those happenings or doings. Like you normally would say, well, this person was full of kindness and has the quality of kindness, and that's why we saw a kind action come from him or her. In the first instance, there was not the recognition that the qualities belonged, it was more the recognition that the action belonged to God. But in this instance, the second illusion is destroyed, and meaning the source of those actions in terms of their coloring, their mood, their nature, their characteristic, that gives rise to those actions, even those in every instance are only the qualities of God. Again, if you were to read several of the chapters of the Fusus in Ibn Arabi, who is after all isn't this an existential doctrine essentially, like a radical existential doctrine, is really what it is here. Only one. It's a very simple doctrine, only one. Only one existence, only one action, only one doer, etc. And everything else is illusory. And here he's merely trying to define from an experiential point of view. So how does this happen experientially? Can anybody relate to this distinguishing? How are we going to distinguish between happenings and qualities? Especially this last part, because there it's a little bit more clear. You would have to be involved. As he says, Hich sifat nabinat غیر او و خود را و اشیا را مظهر و مجالی صفات الهی شناسد و صفت او را در خود ظاهر بیند. Again, and doesn't see any quality other than that of the Haq, and even for himself, meaning the person, him or her, and all of the things, he only knows them as the theaters and places of manifestation of the divine qualities, and he sees clearly, or she sees clearly, that the divine qualities are appearing directly in himself. So can you relate to this at all, not through intellectual, but through your experience, say with zikr or your spiritual experience? Can you relate to this at all? Yes, Faisal.
Is it to feel, for example, a thankful one, that at a certain point you're thankful to Allah, and then all of a sudden you see that you're not thankful, that He is thankful, that this is not from you, but it's just this one thankful. And that you thought that you're separate, thankful to God,
Yeah.
but at one point that falls apart, and there is almost like a fana in that specific quality.
Yeah, so this is good, because this is the easiest entry is through let's call them semi-drunken perceptions that the person who holds their liquor can still act in the world and pass, but all the while is in fact in a different domain of perception. But this is not at the completely abstracted level. See, so the level he's talking about is more accessible, A, and B, more practical in a broader way. So in Quran, it says, Shahid Allahu innahu la ilaha illahu. You guys know this verse? What does he say?
Allah witnesses that there is no Allah but Allah.
Yeah, so you can have the experience in zikr where you're saying La ilaha illahu, la ilaha illahu, and suddenly your zikr moves to a completely different level, and the actuality that he is the one actually. See, this is what Faisal is saying, now that you can witness, it's not just about that. But if you want the doctrine in Quran, then I'm just explaining like one of the verses that makes it clear in Quran is when it's actually God who is witnessing these things. I'm not saying this I'm not the one pointing to this. I'm quoting from Muhammad Parsa and other people who have singled out this verse to make this point. Okay? I agree with it, but I'm not the one who is singling it out. They have already singled it out through many Sufi books, this verse as an example. But another example is the doctrine of better not to know. So the problem with separation and the problem with intellectual discussions about free will is I'm probably coming from a place of concern. Whether that concern is worry or desire, but I'm coming from a place of concern. And at a profound level, it would be better to not bring that concern into the equation. And it would be better, therefore, not to know. So again, the way that as a practical usage you should understand is as an individual who has nafs, you could suddenly be thankful, agree? You have nafs, but part of your nafs is not all bad. Your nafs is good if it recognizes that you should be thankful. But you are aware of self, is what I'm trying to say. And like you said earlier, you could be aware of self and suddenly also become aware that there is other than self. Huh? In Upanishads, do you know what the symbol for that is? It's in the profound teachings of the Upanishads is called the two birds. You'll see it in several of the texts. There are two birds on the tree. One of them is eating the fruit and is flying and is making the nest, and the other one is watching. So if you read again, I'm trying to point out this is not restricted to Sufism. This is like a universal viewpoint developed not by philosophers but by people who sat for many years in meditation. And they say so. They say we came to this wisdom by turning to God or turning to true reality, and here's what we discovered. It's like a tree where there are two birds, one that eats and one that watches. Okay? So, now what I mean about not knowing is there's another level where I go into the spiritual practice and I say, oh God, I am a contaminator. My nafs will contaminate any conception, any thought, any effort, any viewpoint I may have. I know I have verified this is so that I will contaminate it. Therefore, please just take away my wisdom whatsoever. See? Take away my self-knowledge whatsoever. And this is the doctrine of negation, commonly known via negativa. What is the value of that? The value of that is with the loss of self-concern, there emerges the true relationship. The person comes to know who their Lord is. This is, of course, the doctrine of Rabbi Has. What's Rabbi Has?
Special Lord?
Yeah, particular Lord, special Lord. Whose doctrine is it? Yeah, because it's a school. We have to understand this is in Quran, but there's a school. It's the existentialist school. So it says that don't waste your time trying to be somebody else, basically, what it says. And the problem is that you are so many people, you are already so busy being somebody else. It's your habit to try to be somebody else. Kids do it. They hear foreign accents, they imitate them. See, you have this problem, which is that you're always trying to be somebody else. You don't know that you're looking for your real self, and you've accumulated all kinds of masks and personas and veils and costumes. And what happens if you become naked? Or as they say in Zen, what is your original face? What happens if you remove all of that? Then you will see that it was not wise to repeat a divine name. It's unwise to have a thief, to give the keys to a thief. It's unwise to give the money to an embezzler. All of these things are unwise. It's better to give them to a stranger. The stranger, you don't know, maybe it'll work out, maybe, but at least they're not going to steal it, see? So the stranger is the one that we don't know, meaning once, but in fact, it's again, like in Gestalt therapy, if it wishes to emerge and you realize all along you have been preventing it from emerging. You realize in a sacred, the most sacred moment, what does Ibn Arabi say the sacred moment is? He says it is in the verse that we talked about earlier today. Ya ayatul nafs al-mutma'inna urji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyatan fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. What's this verse that I have shown? It's in the feminine. Why is it in the feminine? The grammar. Because nafs is feminine.
Nafs is feminine.
Yeah, so we are feminine, meaning we wish to give birth to truth, reality, love. We are the earth. We wish to grow as nafs. Nafs is the earth. And if you give it water and sun, the seeds in the earth, they will sprout. So only somebody who has wisdom will leave it alone and just allow the natural cycle to occur, get out of the way and allow the natural cycle to occur. And so nafs is in the feminine, and whoever has arrived at this place of nafs mutma'inna, what is mutma'inna?
Secure.
I'm sorry?
Secure?
Secure and kind of peaceful because of that security, like really relaxed, finally can rest completely because there's nowhere else to go. Yeah. Pleased and pleasing, full of pleasure,
Absolute.
joy, and absolute.
Absolute.
Yeah, so it's absolute beauty, joy, pleasure. You see, paradise. So no surprise that it's connected to the idea of paradise, because he says, "Wadkhuli, fadkhuli fi ibadi," and then enter in among my servants.
The highest point.
Yeah, but fi ibadi is
The highest point of
well,
the
wait a minute.
triangle.
Let's take the grammar literally. What is ibad? What does ibad mean?
Ibad means
The worshippers. Huh?
completely.
Well, yes, it may be completely, but it has to do with the plural of abds. Huh? There's different abds, and he is saying in the plural. Enter in among those abds, ubad. And abd has rab. See, in other words, the verse is very consistent. So when he says, Urji ila rabbiki, in the feminine, he's very specific, meaning, that means there's more than one Lord. Who are the Lord? They are divine names. There's not really more than one, but they have different facets. They're called the divine names. And for Ibn Arabi and for the people of this school, because the discussion is about free will, but free will invariably brings us to this next domain of the qualities, and two levels have been mentioned that are experiential. Faisal mentioned one. Did you grasp what he said? This is a very more likely entry level to this domain of the qualities. He said very clear, I'm experiencing some emotion like thankfulness, and I suddenly realize, not through intellectual cleverness, but through some strange breaking down of a boundary of separation, I experience that only he has thankfulness. right? So that's what he said, huh? And I'm saying to you, there's another level where I realize that I tend to interfere too much in the process, and if I were to merely get out of the way, I would find out much more about the matter. Because no one has the same exact Lord, according to Sheikh Ibn Arabi and the Sufis. And the Lord of this person is also related to their inhiraf. What's inhiraf? Their deviation, you see? Bud Omara Nam Inja Bud Paras. Is he an extreme Shiite? You know, the Rumi saying this. Bud Omara Nam Inja Bud Paras. Lek Momen Bud Namesh Dar Allah. Do you guys remember this line? So what is he talking? What is Rumi talking about here? Why does he say he was an idol worshiper?
Because he was.
He was. That's right. He's saying, look, he's saying, don't imagine that at that stage, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, don't imagine that he knew his own destiny or his true nature, his own true nature. Did he? He did not know. And in fact, in his humanity, he retains a bit of the gruffness of this person, who is kind of has the sense of severity and so forth. But we know Maulana identifies his name as true believer. Mu'min is Mu'min not a name that we share with God? Like literally, some of the divine names, God says that you are Mu'min or I can be Mu'min. In other ones, we infer that that is so. Like you give an example of Shakur, If we have Shukr, we are Shakur and he is Shakur, Sabur, etc. But in some cases, he says very clearly that he is speaking to the Mu'mineen and so forth. So the point here is at this level, we want to understand that the Tajalli Sifati can be known by reflection to a limited degree, by direct experience in daily life, as per what Faisal John has said, for example, and most profoundly can only be known when I don't know. The one who usually says, I wish to know. We want to get rid of that one. And that's the very one asking the question about free will, yeah? The one who is concerned for some reason. There's something in it for me to know about free will. Agreed? Okay, now the last level, because remember this section is the had yek bara hasti ra va taraj dar ayad dar pay Ahmad va miraj. This is the line, the commentary is on this line about gives completely his existence over to plunder and comes out following the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in his miraj, meaning he's making this miraj, and the miraj is precisely this rising up is, think of it now as, think of each level as different ropes holding you. And then first they cut the coarse ropes that prevented you from seeing the actions are God's actions. And you're starting to fly, but there's still some other ropes holding you. But you're flying like 3 feet above the ground, you see. And now the next ropes are cut, and now you're flying higher, but there's still some ropes holding you. So the last one, we will listen to what he has to say. He says, مرتبه سوم ببخشید که مرتبه دوم بر اصطلاح محققان این را مقام تمس مینامند. They call this level, tams means another kind of annihilation, erasing of, because remember these are levels of the dissolution or the erasing of illusion. But they've decided to, if you were talking to some Sufis and they said, well no, he had done Ma, but he hadn't done Tams yet. Now you will know what they're talking about, right? I doubt you'll find many people who make that distinction anymore, because this is a medieval conversation that's going on here. Now he says, مرتبه سوم آن است که حضرت حق به تجلی ذاتی با او تجلی شود و سالک جمیع ذوات اشیا در پرتو نور تجلی ذات احدیت فانی یابد و تعیینات عدمی وجود به فنا در توحید ذاتی مرتفع شود که اینک میت و اینهم میتون، یه ایراد از زمر است، نه؟ که از سوره زمر در قرآن است. و هیچ شی را به غیر حق وجود نبیند و وجود اشیا را وجود حق داند و در دیده حق بین عارف کل شیء حالک الی وجهه جلوه‌گری نموده به جز وجود واجب موجودی دیگر نبیند و خیال غیریت نزد وی محال گردد و به اصطلاح این طایفه محق عبارت از این فناس و صاحب این مقام جمعی ذوات و صفات و افعال اشیا را مزمحل و متلاشی در اشیاء ذات و صفات و افعال حق می‌یابد. Okay, so at this level, this third level is such that the presence of true reality, the presence of God, manifests as the essential theophany to the seeker. And what is revealed is that the totality of the essences of things, of all things, are annihilated in the rays of the light of the essential theophany of oneness. And all truly non-existent entifications that appear within being are annihilated in the divine unity, and they lift away, according to the Quranic verse, truly, in this case, as we know it's from Quran, from Zuma, truly, O Prophet, you will die, and all of them will die. They all have to taste death. And they're for nothing whatsoever except for true reality does the seeker see any existence. And even the existence of every single thing the seeker sees as the existence of true reality. And in the heart seeing of the Gnostic, the verse, everything perishes except for his face manifests and reveals itself, that except for necessary absolute existence, there is no other existent thing. And the hallucination and imaginary otherness of things becomes for the seeker an impossibility, meaning because he now sees through this. And according to the expression of this tribe of the Sufis, who are the realized ones. This is the expression of fana. So he's moved to fana now, from the other ones, which was mahwa wa tamsa. And he says, and the possessor of this station realizes that the totality of the essences and the qualities and the actions and doings of all of the things, he realizes and sees them dissolve and become deconstructed in the rays of the essence and the qualities and the actions of true reality. So it's a bit heavy in terms of reading, but I think you get the idea that this is the most fundamental level that, in a sense, we could ask ourselves one question metaphysically is what do they mean by essence? And this goes back quite a long way, their interpretation of the Platonic doctrines, but the way that they come to interpret it is that if we are talking about God's essence, His being and His essence are one and the same thing. Okay? So we are saying God. God's essence, His existence, and His essence, there's no differentiation. His essence is His existence. Whereas with all of the other things, all of the other essences that he's talking about of things, their essence and their existence are not the same thing. Meaning they have no existence, even though they have essence. Okay, so this is again a metaphysical point. I hope it's clear to you that God has the only existence, and therefore His essence and His existence is one and the same thing. But every single other essence, meaning everything we generally know about, has essence but no existence. It has only borrowed existence from true reality. So in other words, that's the fundamental metaphysical principle. So when he says all of the essences of things, what exactly is he talking about? He's talking about these apertures, these theaters of manifestation. That's what he's talking about. And they provide us with multiplicity, with the multiple identities of things outside ourselves and inside ourselves. And he's saying that this, in that moment, not that the person remains in a state of non-involvement with the world. The person is very able to come back into the world, but they're fundamentally changed at this one level, which is they're no longer completely buying into the picture. Why is that? Because instead of the intellect answering the question about free will, instead of the emotions addressing the question of free will, what happened is in Quran it says that the sadr, the breast, the heart, will have an awakening and will have a different vision. And just as we are already complex and able to multitask and to carry on emotional and intellectual and even physical events simultaneously, there is now, the two birds are now visible of the Upanishads. In other words, the difference is there are two birds of the Upanishads. The Sufi is aware of the two birds. And that's why the Upanishads, they're Sufis, they're spiritual people in other words, and they're writing about the two birds. And they realize there's always a witness. Who is the witness?
Shahid.
Yeah, it's only God. Huh? Shahid Allahu, only God is witnessing all of these scenarios. So that's why in Hinduism, what do they call this vast, strange, infinite world of happenings that are the witnessing of God? What is it called in Hinduism? Maya. And it's considered to be like a kind of dream that God is having. Where do we encounter the idea of God having the dream called the universe and the world? In Shavastari. It's in Shavastari, you can see. That it's like one big dream that is happening to one awareness that is exploring another metaphysical challenge, which is the impossibility of limitation. Impossible to limit it in its expansiveness and impossible to limit it in its contraction. So you have poles of infinite direction, polarity. One is, if you think this world is contracted according to that view, there are worlds far more contracted. Just think of it in terms of your own life or people you know. Can you not remember a time when you might have been far more limited and contracted than you are now? I hope so, because I certainly feel like if I was agoraphobic once upon a time, that means that I was afraid to leave my house and I couldn't leave my house. That's a fairly limited world, isn't it? So even in any human being's ordinary life, they could be immensely contracted and fearful and closed down, or they could have basta. So there's kabs and basta. They could immensely expand. But for God, this is it is one of the metaphysical realities, which is the divine self-consciousness concerning the infinite polarity of one to many, we could say. Or another way we could say it is from invisibility and ethereality to concreteness and hyperlimitation in infinitely in both directions.